What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we're taking a look at the Minnesota Wild. It's been a wild season, pun intended there, for Minnesota, and this team had a disappointing outcome. I mean, this is the normal outcome, unfortunately, for the Wild for the past couple of seasons. They make it to the playoffs, there's some hope, and it gets quickly destroyed in the first round of the playoffs. It happened once again here in 2022. It felt different during the season, but ultimately the same result. What has to change for the Minnesota Wild? Is there some psychological things wrong? Does the roster need to change? What needs to happen this summer for the Minnesota Wild? So we're going to go over that today. So we're going to start off looking at really what was this playoff series. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they won those two games, but they could have got swept. And the reason I say that is you look at the last three games, had they not won game one, it would have been a sweep. They would have won 4 in a row. And it's one of those things when you're the Minnesota Wild, you're a team that was expected to do well. Things seem different. But when you looked at the team on paper and you look after game 7 on, daily faceoff, you look at their line combinations, it's kind of like, yeah, now I know why they really did struggle this year. There are some weaknesses to this hockey team. Psychologically, there were some things. It started off in game 1, Jared Spurgeon with that spearing. What was he doing to Pavel Buchnevich there? There was no reason for that. And that's the kind of stuff where it just kind of snowballed from there. A couple of miscues, Marc-Andre Fleury not taking the puck behind the net, somebody not getting... that's stuff that happens in like December or October. That should not be happening in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Just so many miscues and things that, unfortunately for the Wild, just did not go their way. And a lot of that, I hate to say, the team didn't look all that desperate. Like, they didn't look like they were about to get eliminated. And there just there was a lack of urgency, clearly, from the Minnesota Wild. And it costed them. They really... As much as they put up a fight and took it to 6 games, like I said, things fell off very quickly in that game 4, and they were never able to recover from that. So now I've got that out of the way, and I'm sure a lot of Minnesota fans are already pissed off, but some of you may be sticking around. You're like, yeah, he's right. So hopefully that's the case. If you are, thank you very much. But let's take a look at what could happen this summer. So first things first, I could see them getting rid of Dean Evason. I think they were just... I'd hope that Bill Guerin had a heart-to-heart with him after that Game 6. He did not change the lines very much. He just really didn't do much, and it just seemed like, what are you doing? Like, your team has lost 2 straight and been destroyed in Games 4 and 5, and you're not going to change anything. Like, that is just so infuriating. And then... you look at what happened. Like I said, they just didn't look ready to go. Like, there was just some certain things where there was just really bad miscues. And like I said, the lack of urgency. And that all comes back to the head coach. And that's all on Dean Evason. And I know he likes to let the guys kind of control the room and do their thing. But in the playoffs, the coaches and teams that do the best are the structured teams that follow the coach. And who are good examples of that? Right now, Daryl Sutter in Calgary. Barry Trotz, the past 2 seasons with the New York Islanders. Those are the successful teams. And maybe they aren't the most talented. Minnesota's not the most talented team in the playoffs. I don't think anybody would have argued that, Minnesota fans included. But if you have a coach that gets the most out of their players, that might be the difference in a series where maybe you are playing a team that's just completely outskilled. They're much more skilled than you, but you're able to play because of your structure and the way you do things. And that really wasn't the case under Dean Evason. And that's why I look at guys, specifically guys like Lane Lambert and Rick Tocchet. Lane Lambert of the New York Islanders. He hasn't been a head coach since his time in Milwaukee in the American Hockey League before he joined Barry Trotz on the bench as an assistant. And we know he's been with Barry Trotz for a while now. So Lane Lambert, I think, would be a really nice head coach for them if he doesn't stay with the Islanders, depending on what they do. I think that's kind of what he's waiting on. And then Rick Tocchet. Rick Tocchet also has a tie with Bill Guerin, who he was the assistant coach with the Pittsburgh Penguins when Bill Guerin was the assistant general manager. to Jim Rutherford. So there is a couple of ties there with Pittsburgh, and I could see that potentially coming to fruition. I think Tocchet would be a nice fit with the Wild. With that said, who are some guys that I think are on the block? Some of you guys may disagree with me on this, but I think up front, I think Kevin Fiala, I think that's, I mean, especially with how he played in the playoffs, kind of punched his ticket out of Minnesota. So there's his airplane ticket, just boot you out. So I think that's it for Kevin Fiala. Jordan Greenway, more because of the cap situation, he's making $3 million for the next 3 seasons per year. He's making $3 million. So $9 million over the next 3 years. I know he just signed that extension a couple months ago, but that's something to consider. Again, if you're trying to shed salary, that's how this stuff works. He doesn't have any no movement clauses or no trade clauses, so they would be able to do that. Again, it hurts the reputation. You sign it, you extend a guy, and then trade him. But welcome to the world of hockey. That's how it works. So I wonder if that's something they would do. And then on defense, Jared Spurgeon, I know he's the captain. He's the guy. But again, talk about Dean Evason not being a great coach. A lot of some of the blame has to go to the leadership here. And I don't think it's Zuccarello. I don't think it's Kaprizov. Honestly, I'm kind of giving it here to Spurgeon. I think as one of the veterans on this team, one of the leaders, the captain, you would have expected, again, trying to lead by example, showing some urgency, showing some fight. And Spurgeon was the captain of Loserville there in Minnesota. Of the guys that did not play well in this series, Jared Spurgeon led the way. He was not good in this series at all. And again, that's going to be a tough contract to move. He's making over $7.5 million per season for the next 6 or 7, maybe even 8 years. I don't remember, but it's somewhere around that. It's a long time. So the Minnesota Wild have some decisions to make there. So that's on that front. Also, Matt Dumba. I think Matt Dumba is the most likely defenseman to get moved. His contract ends next summer in 2023, so don't be surprised if we see Dumba's name being thrown around the rumor mill. In particular, I think Fiala and Dumba could both go to New Jersey. I think they are fit there. Maybe for the second overall pick. Minnesota brings in one of those centers, which we're going to get to that in a second. They need a center. So maybe they go after Cooley or Savoie. But again, you're not going to be able to re-sign Fiala. I don't think he wants to stay in Minnesota. They don't have the money to. And you could also trade Dumba there a year out from free agency and kind of revamp that defense. And we'll get there as well. So, most realistic, I would almost bet money on Fiala and Dumba both being traded this summer. I think that's what you're looking at here in terms of saving salary cap space and just to change things up a little bit, right? You're not changing the whole team. You're changing little things here and there. I think that's what they could be looking at this summer. So who are some core players that have to stay and are kind of the quote-unquote future of this franchise? Up front, Kaprizov, Rossi, Boldy, and Eriksson Ek. Probably not going to get much debate on that one. This is the young guys coming up and kind of being the future of the Wild. And again, as frustrating as this season was and how this should have been the year, I mean, they have so many young guys that are still developing that this is not their cup window. For all the people that keep saying that, I don't really understand that. I get what you're saying in the perspective of guys like Zuccarello and Spurgeon and Brodin and Dumba, and obviously, guys like Marc-Andre Fleury. But this team still has a shelf life. I would say, okay, this year didn't go well. Maybe next year they don't do so well. 2 years from now. So the next 2 years, they might not do well. Then we start to see them, say 3, 4, 5 years from now, being legit contenders. When Rossi spent some time in the NHL, Boldy, Eriksson Ek's gotten a little more mature and a little older. Kaprizov obviously continuing to do what he does. I think the Wild will get better, and once they fix this blue line, I think that's a critical thing to look at. That's why when we look at the core on the blue line, it's really down to 2 guys, Carson Lambos and Calen Addison. You could argue Jonas Brodin, they just re-signed him, and Jared Spurgeon if he stays. So you're really looking at those 4 guys. Spurgeon, Brodin, Lambos, and Addison are your 4 guys that I would say right now are the core of your blue line. And that's kind of it. I think the Wild right now, it sucks. I mean, this is a team you were hoping would go on a nice playoff run, but I think culturally, there are some deficits for this team, and I think it's going to start with getting a center. They need a center, because you look at this the 4 centers for Game 6, an elimination game. Ryan Hartman is your first line center. Ryan Hartman is your first line center. Tell me, in what world does that lead to success? I'm just, honestly, when you have the other side, where you have Kyrou, O'Reilly, and all those other guys down the middle, what's his name? I always forget his name. Whatever his name is. You get what I'm saying. They have such a deeper center core. Every team does, right? Centers are so important. And we have Hartman, Frederick Gaudreau, Joel Eriksson and Tyson Jost. Joel Eriksson is by far your best center there. And he's on the 3rd line in Game 6. Like, those things just it just blows your mind. And they need to fix that. Like, if they trade Fiala and or Dumba, you have to get a center in return. You need a top 6 center. I don't know how they get it. I don't know where they're getting it from, whether it's a trade, free agency, the draft. Nobody cares how they're getting it, but they need a top 6 center. It's desperate at this point. And goaltending, you're going to keep Talbot. I don't think there's anything there. Maybe they pick up a backup on a 1 or 2 year deal. That's great. And then they need to get another defenseman, I think, and we will probably see them address that to replace Dumba. But Dumba I think he's just spent too much time here. He can't put the puck in the back of the net. Might be harder to trade him in that sense, but I think Dumba could be a guy. I know there was some talk about trading him last year. I think they will revisit that again this summer. So that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What do you think the Minnesota Wild's GM, Bill Guerin, has to do to get this team back on track next year? Is it trading some of those guys like Fiala and Dumba? Is it bringing in another center? I think that's a clear need for them, and a defenseman. Let me know what you guys think. Give me some names. Who do you want to come to Minnesota? Let me know. And I will see you again next time. Go Wild.